So now, chapter 4, we have already looked at statement 6 and Chodrak's commentary. I said that I want to go over some of the notes provided by Sobich, and he quotes quite a bit from the Dorshema and Rinjangma. By now, we have about 90 classes. You should know what Dorshema Rinjangma, so that I'm not keep repeating what Dorshema Rinjangma is. If you don't know, you please write it down in front of you. Dorshema Rinjangma, Chodra. Chodra is the Tibetan name of Dhammakirti. Chodra Dhammakirti, same person, right? Dorshema Rinjangma. Dorshema is the commentary written by Dorje Sherab, Dor-she. Dorje Sherab, Dor-she. This is how Tibetan contract names. Dor-she, Dorje Sherab, so-called Dor-she Ma. It's the commentary written by Dorje Sherab. Rinjangma is by Rinchen Changchup. Rinjang. Rinchen Changchup. Rinjangma. So Rinjangma, also an early commentary. These two commentaries were written very soon after Sherab Jungne, right? The other name. Sherab Jungne was the one who compiled the Gongchik. So Sherab Jungne, not long after Sherab Jungne compiled Gongchik and started to teach Gongchik, then Dorshema and Rinjangma were composed. As far as I know, I don't think Sherab Jungne himself authored any commentaries. Maybe there is. I'm a little vague. But anyway, what we do have now from the earliest period is the Dorshema and the Rinjangma. Yeah. Then this text that we're looking at, this commentary that we're looking at, is about 400 years later. And this is by Chodra, Dhammakirti. Chodra or Dharmakirti has at least two commentaries. This one called Nimanangwa, which is like the light of the sun, or the illumination of the sun, Nimanangwa. This is the Nimanangwa. He has another commentary that was written in verse, talk about fancy, to write a commentary in verse, not in prose. That has been translated many years ago by a German student, and it was published. You can get from the Tara Foundation website, I think, in Germany. There is a translation done. And that's in the verse form. What we're looking at is Nimanangwa. So Sobich has translated Nimanangwa, but supplemented a lot of the Nimanangwa, supplemented in the notes from Rinjangma and Dorshema. Then he did further work in bringing more context for us. The context of two contexts at least. One, during the time of Jigten Sumgön, who might Jigten Sumgön have in mind when he says, we don't agree with those guys. That's one context. In Jigten Sumgön's time, who might be the people? And what do these people believe? Right? Then the other context is, by Chodrak's time, why is Chodra emphasizing this or that? And so then that has a lot to do with, as I've repeated again and again, in some ways, Chodra is a little defensive, right? Because in the 400 years since the publication of Gongchik, right, especially from the Sakya, beginning with Sakya Pandita, there has been very strong criticisms of what they think Gongchik is saying. So then in 400 years, by the time of Chodra, he's on the defensive. Yeah? Not totally defensive, but on the defensive. So he has to respond. Right? We've already seen those examples where he says, you say, and whenever he is vague and say, you say, we know who he's talking to. He's talking to Sakya Pandita. Of course, by that point, Sakya Pandita already passed away. Sakya Pandita is actually a junior contemporary, one generation after Jigten Sungden. Sakya Pandita and Sherab Jungne knew each other. They were friends. In fact, despite, so this is something to remember, despite Sakya Pandita very strongly kind of criticizing the content of Gongchik, as far as we know, the relationship between Sakya Pandita and Sherab Jungne was good. I think when Sakya Pandita's uncle passed away, who was also his teacher, they requested Sherab Jungne to go perform, to be the chief kind of officiant for the funeral rituals. Yeah, so there was no real animosity. No, yeah, just because they disagree on these points, there was no animosity. So the relationship was good. Unfortunately, in 1217, Gyoba Rinpoche passed away, right? Unfortunately, in 1290, there were political turmoil, and a group of occupying Mongols, and Mongols were very active in Tibet, but a group of Mongols, in collaboration with the secular leaders of the Sakya area, who were, of course, followers of the Sakyapa lineage, they collaborated and destroyed Drigung. There was an attack on Drigung. So that added to the uneasy feeling. I'm also kind of pointing this out. So then all the debates about Gongchik, I'm sure, after 1290, is tainted by, you burned our place down. It was a devastation in 1290. It said that so many people died. According to our tradition, our records, it said only those highly accomplished who could literally fly survive that attack. The main statue of Gyoba Rinpoche is said to contain his heart relic that is put in that statue. That statue had to be buried in the ground to prevent destruction. So years after that destruction, they came back, all the Drigung people came back, and the story goes that the statue called out and said, I'm here, I'm here. And so they dug, and then they found that statue. So the statue is in the Golden Chapel now. Some of you, Judy, have seen that statue with me in Tibet. Cultural Revolution, I think it also survived. They hid it again. Then when in 1290, after the destruction in 1290, they came back. To be fair, the Sakya, some parts of the Sakya secular authority, I'm sure urged by their spiritual leaders, said, you guys have to help them rebuild. So they did help rebuild Drigung. A lot of very regret, on the side of the Sakyapa end. But that's totally, politics. And politics in Tibet was always very messy. Don't imagine, they have Buddha Dharma, everything is fine. The politics in Tibet, always very messy. In part because the Mongols were very involved. And so the different groups in Tibet aligned themselves with different powerful Mongol groups. So later in Chodrak's time, it was also very tumultuous. 400 years later, very tumultuous. Again, another group of Mongols were busy in Tibet. And this time, that group of Mongols supported the Gelugpas and basically helped the fifth Dalai Lama take control of central Tibet, what we now call central Tibet. So then the fifth Dalai Lama became king of Tibet. And from there, that's how the 14th Dalai Lama was also king of Tibet until he went into exile. It's from the time of the fifth Dalai Lama in the 17th century. So during that time, again, Drigong was aligned with a different group. Yeah, I don't think they were aligned with Mongols, but they were aligned with another different power, Tibetan power. And Karma Kagyu was with another group. I think maybe Karma Kagyu and Drigong Kagyu may be same group. Yeah. But the Gelugpa got the support of Pamodrupa's descendants. Not Pamodrupa, sorry. Pamodrupa's monastery is called the Pakdru dynasty, but the Pakdru dynasty is not from Pamodrupa's family. It's actually from one of Jigten Sumgön's students, Drakpa Jungne. Drakpa Jungne's family is called the Lang family. The Lang family, because Kyopa Rinpoche appointed Drakpa Jungne to go anchor his teacher's monastery. I told about this story before. Drakpa Jungne then, his family became the main power there. Eventually, this family basically supported Gelugpas. Yeah. Eventually, their religious affiliation changed into Gelugpa, so they supported the Gelugpas. And by the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, together with the Mongols, the Gelugpas became the main power. So there were also, I mentioned Chodra himself was put in prison by the Gelugpa government for basically belonging to a different group, challenging the power of the Gelugpas. So they put Chodra in prison until the Dalai Lama himself met Chodra in prison and then felt a connection with Chodra and then released Chodra. And then they became friends. Yeah. So Buddha Dharma is not going to make your politics easier. If anything, yeah, Buddha Dharma is not going to make your politics easier. And lesson from Tibet also is for good or for bad, you could all have the Dharma and be completely different in your political opinions. Hopefully now we're not going to people's houses and burning them down for those reasons. We're doing pretty good by those standards. We just post, not so nice memes on our Facebook, And that's a great improvement from burning down someone's house because you don't agree with them. 4.6. The notes there. Yeah. So before going to the notes, someone who was listening to our Gongchik class, even though not part of this early class because of time zone issues, asked some questions, and so I thought it would be good to kind of summarize my response. It's actually sort of coming up from a question that was asked last time during our class. I think it was Larry maybe asking a question. And this is the question about Jyotis. Jyotis, the Brahmin boy who observed celibacy for 20,000 years or whatever, and then broke his celibacy observance for 12 years to be married to this Brahmin woman who, according to the story, was going to kill herself if he didn't do that. In that story, actually, now, I looked more into it. Actually, the story, what happened was later, she passed away. And that is why after 12 years, then he went back to his observance of the vow of celibacy. To point out further, here, according to the story, he did not even break the vow. I'm sure he returned the vow. So this is not on the level of a more formalistic aspect of the vow. Yeah. So like, for example, in the Buddhist, in the Vinaya vows, it is said that for a monk or a nun, if they can no longer keep any of their main vows, then it's better to return the vows properly rather than to break them while you still have them. That's generally, it said this is how you should do it. Yeah. So here we're not even talking about him breaking the vow in that sense. Here is actually a very subtle level of breaking, as in, even though he did not formally break, the story, as far as we have it, the details are not there to say whether he returned them or not. But I'm sure what is being emphasized here is that we're not even talking about in the formal way, did he break or did he not break? I think he probably, return it and say, okay, now I'm not going to keep that anymore. Yeah. But still, right, according to Kyopo Rinpoche's teachings, afflictive emotions are still involved. How might it be involved? Possibly, Possibly it would be, obviously, attachment, desirous attachment. So maybe at the beginning there was no desirous attachment. So again, we don't know a lot of details of this story, right? They just give us a very brief account. We don't know if, in his heart, he was like, oh yeah, I actually like her. I want to be with her, but I have a vow, right? But as far as we can tell, he doesn't really know her that much. So we could maybe assume, like, at the beginning when he decided out of compassion, I don't want this person to die, So even if it means there will be negative impact on my immediate karma, I'm going to do it. And so that much we know. So in Chodrak's commentary, it says, Jyoti's thought, oh, I could go to the hell realm for this, but out of genuine concern for her, I will bear the consequences. I think this is really the key point that Kyopo Rinpoche is emphasizing. It's not so much at the end to do it or not to do it, but to do it with what kind of understanding? He says it's wrong understanding if we think, right, somehow whether meditating on emptiness or meditating on compassion, meaning with a compassionate heart, with an understanding of emptiness, you can somehow change the way karma works. So that when you plant an apple seed, you get a mango tree. You plant a mango seed, you get an apple tree. He says, no, it doesn't happen like this. Right? Instead, if you do it, what will help you is if you understand that I'm going to do this, which is negative in this context, but because of my bodhicitta, I will be able to endure, right, the immediate consequence of this act. So in a way, you could say this is true self-sacrifice. Yeah, this is true self-sacrifice. Yeah? Self-sacrifice that has no consequence is not very meaningful. At least to me, Oh, I will sacrifice myself, knowing very well you will be forgiven. Well, then it's like, it's a no-brainer. In fact, in our lives, often we do not have the assurance that if I stick my neck out, everything will go well in the end, right? In fact, that's not how we experience life. Often when we stick our neck out, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. But because we are so committed to protecting others, we have to be ready to say, I will do it. Yeah. So in Jyoti's case, yeah, it says, he says, I know I will probably go to the hell realms, so I'm going to do it. But interestingly, in the commentary, it says that he did not end up in the hell realm in his next life, unlike the captain. So Chodra gives 3 stories: captain, king, right, and the Brahmin boy. In the case of captain, now, so to draw some common, what is common to all 3 of them, yeah, is that they had bodhicitta. So in all 3 cases, yeah, they had bodhicitta. In captain's case, in all 3 of them, they have bodhicitta. In all 3 of them, ultimately, what they did helped them to shorten their kind of time in confused existence. So you got that? So that means in the end, they did the right thing, as we would say it. They did the right thing. Because if the right thing is shorten your time in samsara, right? Because it says, I will swiftly accomplish, right? In our bodhicitta prayer, we say, I will quickly, I will swiftly. So the more you can shorten your time in samsara, the better. So from that perspective, all 3 cases, they have bodhicitta. They did the right thing. Yeah? Looking at it from the end, at the end of the process. All 3 did the right thing. Now, looking at it in the short term, the first one, it says, no, he did go to the hell realms. In some other tradition, they say he was only reborn in the hell realm for 1 moment. Then because of his compassion and everything, poof, he went back out of the hell realm. Only 1 moment. Drigong commentaries don't accept that. So in a way, I would say, it's a way of telling stories and forwarding your value system. Yeah, you can elaborate the story, in any way. I mean, maybe I'm saying something heretical, but you can elaborate the story in any way. But more interesting, I think, for us is to listen carefully to the way the story is told. Then from there, we can understand what kind of value system is operating there. So in the Drigong telling of this story, it says, no, he was born in the hell realm for a long time. But he wasn't born in the hell realms in the way that most other beings are born in the hell realm. He was born in the hell realm, but protected in a way by what? By the armor of patient endurance. Just as our mothers would suffer on our behalf without any complaints. He did that. He did that, captain. Then in the king example, very clearly opposite of the captain, again in the short term, as in, even when he was taking from everyone, he wasn't stealing. He wasn't a thief because he knew that he had to like put aside all this food and everything because a famine is going to come. Because according to the story, someone actually came and told him, like a fortune, like someone who can see into the future, and said, "You got to prepare for this. You got to prepare for this." So even when he took, right, he did not take with the thought of self-cherishing. Yeah. I think the story would get more complicated if it says in the process of taking, and when people try to not give it to him, he accidentally kills someone. Then that story becomes very complicated. But of course, no complication like this. It just said that he took from them with the implication that they complained and said, "Oh, this is terrible. This king is so evil." But he took. Then when the famine came, he distributed the food. Oh, then everyone, oh, this is such a great king, right? So in his case, it's like blameless in the whole process, from the motivation process to the execution process to the result process. In the case of the captain, blameless in the motivation level, right? Execution level, well, no pun intended, not blameless. Result, blameless. Result, blameless in the sense of final result. But short result himself in the hell realm, of course, that is not so ideal. In the case of the Brahmin boy, a little unclear. Sobish points out why that example is given, because it's not very clear there. So to me, the way I feel is that third example is sort of in the middle ground between the king and the captain. Yeah, because in the case of the Brahmin boy, Jyotis, it seems like at the beginning when he made that decision, there was no afflictive emotion of desire involved. They give no indication, right, that he was also, oh, I think I do like her. I think I would like to experience, being with her. There's no suggestion of that. So it seems like, at the beginning, even though himself, he was concerned. He said, oh, I might go to the hell realms for this. But then he said, oh, it's okay if that's the case. So it seems that at the beginning, there is no fault. Yeah. Then Sobich points out, well, that he stayed for 12 years with her, probably at some point, some kind of desire and attachment begins to form. But then in his story, we were told that, which is something that we are not told in the case of the captain and the king. In his case, we are told that he went back to his previous practice after the wife passed away. And in particular, he meditated on the 4 immeasurable minds called the 4 Brahma dwellings, Brahma Vihara. Then it said, by the power of that. So why it says that he cultivated the 4 Brahma Viharas? Why specifically the Brahma Viharas? Brahma Vihara means dwelling in the Brahma state. The 4 immeasurable minds are also called the 4 Brahma states. Brahma is a very kind of high level within samsara, still within samsara, but very high level. It said that they're very noble-minded, these beings. So he practiced the 4 Brahma Viharas. Why he did not practice directly Buddha's teachings? I believe that during this time when this is happening, no Buddhas have appeared in the world. But the Brahma Viharas, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, whether Buddhas appear or don't appear, these are things that individuals can discover themselves. Yeah, you don't need to be instructed on these things. Correct view of emptiness, you need. Brahma Viharas, you don't. So it said he meditated on that. He practiced that. And as a result of that, he was born in a Brahma realm. Yeah, so this 3 stories that Chodra gives, I think there are nuances in there. There's a range, completely blameless, the king's actions. Captain, there's problem there. And Jyoti's a little unclear. Yeah, a little unclear. But the bottom line point is still, the main point to me for 6 is having a correct understanding about how the workings of cause and effect cannot be turned upside down. Yeah, so almost you can say in this case is you plant a mango seed, right? And a mango seed gives rise to a mango plant that gives rise to mangoes. Even if you want so much for it to be apple, you have to patiently eat your mangoes and think, oh, I will endure the stinking mangoes, even though I was wishing it was apples. So the need to be brave, to have this courage. There is never mind. Any questions or comments?
Dr. Lai, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that they emphasize a lot about committing non-virtuous deeds of body and speech, and if they are permitted to bodhisattvas or not. But
yes.
I may see that they don't mention specifically the deeds of the mind.
Yes. So I said, before, the mind completely, it says no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the difference with the captain, because I saw that in the last paragraph of notes in 4.6, they said that why the captain committed a real fault, because he had to cultivate anger to kill the...
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
Yeah.
So Sobish, explained that, like Sobish said, even though like in the commentary, they don't go into that, but we can kind of think a little bit about that, right? Like, for the captain, right? In order to kill someone, you do have to have, in that circumstance,
Right.
Which of course I think like in the circumstance of like a doctor, doing euthanasia, in a hospital, I think the state of mind is a little different. Yeah, it's complicated. I don't know the answer, but I think the state of mind is different. Yeah, it's quite different. Probably not as negative, if there is any negative. Yeah, not as negative as like stabbing someone. In terms of what is required of your mind and emotions to do something like that.
But in that case, the captain knew he had to bear with the consequences of his actions.
Yes, he knew that. Yes, and he knew all of that, and he said, let me bear it. So in that sense, he was very courageous. Yeah, and real self-sacrifice. It's like, it's okay, I can go to the hell realm, because he's also cultivated, endurance. And so the warning is like the rest of us, we don't have this kind. in the statements to come, this issue, this broader issue of motivation and the power of the mind, the nature of things, all of this, right, is going to be addressed. So if you are unclear at this point, we have to read more. We have to go more because we're going to learn more, actually. Because some of the statements to come will slightly modify, I think, what we think we know now based on 4.6. Yeah, 4.6 is not the final word on things. There are very interesting nuances that will come in later statements. So again, we cannot like just latch on to one statement, and the commentaries for one statement, and not consider the other statements. So the other statements are coming still. Yeah.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
The mention of euthanasia in a hospital setting
Uh-huh.
is also quite interesting because the current ethics are that if you withhold care
yes,
that is being useless, there's no stigma because you're not actively doing something to the patient.
Yes, yes.
But if you actively do something,
there's a stigma, right?
there is a stigma and it's forbidden.
Currently, yes.
Yes. So to me, the morality of that situation is very similar to the fact that what you're talking before. It's consistent.
Correct. Yeah, correct. The withholding, so sometimes people, I've heard, people in actual situations like that, saying like to withhold is simply like saying, we're not actively doing anything. We're allowing the body to do what it does.
Yes, nature taking its course.
Right. And so also, when people are at that point themselves, they don't want to eat, they don't want to drink. So then they say, don't force the food and the drink. So, in this issue, it's also related to the state of mind that is like ignited in a certain person. Yeah, so it's not about, again, we have to take the kind of like do and don't do like commandment framework out of this. This is really quite subtle, all these points. Now let's look at Sobish because he I think he very nicely kind of translate some of these into a way of discussing. I think it's easier for us to digest. So I think it's no reason to rush to the next other statements. So starting in his notes, I know some of you have ebooks, so page number maybe not so helpful, but those of you who have the physical book, 318, starting in the paragraph that says, in contrast to that. Yeah? In contrast to that. So for those of you without the physical book, if you try to look for that section, in contrast to that, it's somewhere in the middle, the first third of, beginning of the maybe second third of the notes. In contrast to that, Jigden Sumgon maintains that even on the pure stages, so there are the other view is that on the pure stages, bodhisattvas, when they act, even their negative actions, it can be somehow turned positive. But here it says, even on the pure stages, a bodhisattva who engages in non-virtuous activities would incur a fault. Meaning there will be, to incur a fault is kind of a very technical way of speaking it. As in, immediately for us, at least we think, oh, you have faults, as in we will blame you for having faults. Here, I think less literally, it's that a bodhisattva who engages in non-virtuous activities, these non-virtuous activities will will produce undesirable results personally for the bodhisattva. Yeah, I think maybe even that is easier to understand if we put it that way. So even on the pure stages, this is talking about the stages of the 10 bodhisattva stages. There's a point called the pure stage, where it's like very advanced. So Kyuba Rinpoche says, even on the pure stages, if they engage in non-virtuous activities, activities that involve the kleshas, then the negative consequences will still naturally come. Now, footnote, right? When it says that it will still naturally come, it is not saying that for sure it will come. There's a difference there. For sure it will come means totally nothing you can do will change anything. That is not what is being said. I think at the very beginning when we started to look at Gongchik, when we looked at especially statement number 1 of chapter 1, I also pointed out that it's also the case that we can purify negative karma. As in, before they ripen, remove them. Yeah. Otherwise, the whole path is meaningless. Why practice? Yeah, why practice if you're not going to be able to make a difference? In fact, in one early like Indian text attributed to the Buddha, which we're pretty sure, like Buddha probably said this, it has a conversation where one monk said, once you have created a karma, once you have created a karmic cause, the effect definitely will come, and there's nothing else you can do about it. The Buddha said, no, this is wrong view. Buddha said, if that's the view, then there is no reason then to engage in the spiritual path. So then the Buddha gave the example, a very good example. He said, if you have a spoonful of salt and you put it into a small glass of water, stir, and you try to drink, it's not drinkable. But if the same spoon of salt is now put into a reservoir, right? Is it still salty? He asked the monk. The monk was like, no. Then the Buddha also said, is there less of the salt? No, not less. But now it's in the reservoir. So the Buddha said, likewise, with negative karma. You cannot change the fact that this teaspoon of salt has already been put into this place. But what you can change is this place. Instead of a little glass, you can make it into a reservoir, a big pond. Right? In other words, we can change our mind. In this context, I think is sort of the equivalent of the patient endurance. Right? Because the heart is so big at that point. Yeah? Even if you're technically, objectively burning in the hell realm, it's not such a big deal. Yeah, you can see even, in a less kind of dramatic way, two people will be in the same situation that is unpleasant. One person gets all worked up about it, and the other person is more or less fine, right? Same circumstance, same hell realm. For one person, it's a big deal. For another person, it's fine. It's like, how can you be fine with this? Well, I am fine. That is like, has become a reservoir. We will see these points. Anyway, coming back here, to understand this position, it is first necessary to differentiate between being a fault and being not permitted, or being proscribed. The Rinjangma points out that the Buddha may have permitted, allowed, maybe allow is better. The Buddha may have allowed an action to great bodhisattva, but faults do arise nonetheless if left unpurified. Let's put it that way. My further footnote. In such a case, a non-virtuous deed is performed by the bodhisattva, such as killing a sentient being, like the captain, through which, however, the victim's maturation and liberation of mind occur. Through which you could maybe even help the victim, as in the case of the captain. If the captain did not kill that person, that would-be murderer, then his karma would be that of killing 500 bodhisattvas. It said that those passengers were all bodhisattvas. So really heinous. So in this case, not only did the captain save the 500 bodhisattvas, he also saved the would-be murderer from the karma of killing 500 bodhisattvas. Now yet, even the Buddha is unable to prevent the results of actions such as killing, because that is the fundamental nature. Meaning the Buddha cannot rescue that person from the karma of killing. The crucial point for a permission is that the bodhisattva must be able to bear consequences. Since such conduct is, according to Rinchen Changchup, quote, only permitted in that regard that the bodhisattva does not deteriorate through the suffering of the result of that karma, namely the three lower realms, and that he is able to bear the consequences. Therefore, faults do arise, meaning undesirable results do appear. Ask yourself, will I be able to bear the consequences or not? There's no other question but to analyze whether suffering, such as hunger, thirst, and freezing in the lower realms, will overpower you, or whether your virtuous dharma conduct will deteriorate as a result. The Buddha has permitted such conduct to those bodhisattvas who have attained acceptance of the fact that phenomena are without origin. Meaning bodhisattvas who have good understanding, good realization of emptiness, which is phenomena are without origin, who can bear to remain in hell for immeasurable eons for the sake of each sentient being, but whose virtuous dharma conduct would not deteriorate through those sufferings. Because sometimes, when we do something that we think, is dharmic, right? It's good, for the sake of something good. Then, but because the way we did it, right, is unskillful. So then faults, right, negative consequences arise. Not only do we suffer the risk of not being able to bear that suffering, but we start to regret and say, oh, I shouldn't have practiced dharma. See where it has gotten me. Then even your dharma, now you are at the risk of abandoning. So it says you have to consider these 2 points. In a less dramatic way, right? In a less dramatic way, all of you probably have this situation. You have responsibilities. You have people around you who have expectations of you, right? And then you're like, oh no, I have a very important Dharma thing that I need to do. And in this case, I would say, if you plan very well and ahead, you can probably not cause so much disruption to the lives of people around you. But then, due to not planning or whatever, lack of mindfulness, you're like, oh, no, very important, I have to do this. Then you do it, instead of doing whatever you already promised you're going to do with your family, with your friends, or whatever. Then later, they get angry and upset with you. Yeah. Then they get so angry and so upset that you start to regret. You're like, oh, yeah, I think, my involvement with Dharma practice, is causing all these problems. Oh, I don't know, maybe. You see, now it's causing bigger damage. So you have to ask, can you withstand? If you cannot, then better not. It will backfire. The Dorshema summarizes, the bodhisattvas who have achieved quote-unquote acceptance are able to remain for limitless eons in the hell of unending torment for the sake of every single sentient being. For such bodhisattvas, it is permitted. And if a single benefit to sentient beings arises because a bodhisattva bears the consequences for the sake of each sentient being, that is holding others dearer than oneself. To hold others dearer than oneself is something that we should develop. The Lojong is all about that. But how is that acceptance through which bodhisattvas is able to bear suffering and avoid the deterioration of his pure conduct achieved? The Dorshema states, the root of not losing the benefit of oneself and others is emptiness and compassion. How? Well, through the combined practice of emptiness and compassion. Consequently, therefore, if one familiarizes, habituate oneself with the quintessence of emptiness and compassion, it will be like that. Having become steadfast in that regard, even though the negative results of engaging in the use of force, such as acts of killing, so the negative results of engaging in the use of force ripen, the maturation and liberation of sentient beings does occur. So even though, negative consequences for you personally will happen, but you can actually help sentient beings, then in that case, you have to do it. But make sure, it says, you stabilize the root of emptiness and compassion. Now Sobich brings in Sakya Pandita as a point of contrast. He says, the difference between Sapan, Sapan is short for Sakya Pandita, Sapan. The difference between Sapan and Jigten Sumgun is that Sapan believes that emptiness and compassion, so both Sakya Pandita and Jigten Sumgun, they talk about the power of emptiness and compassion combined. Yeah, but there is like interesting nuance. So here, Sapan believes that emptiness and compassion purify the non-virtuous cause for the bodhisattva. Whereas Jigten Sumgun maintains that it makes the result bearable for him. So that means Jigten Sumgun is not willing to so easily say, oh, it will purify, oh, it will purify, oh, it will purify. For me, right, where my limited understanding, I think, is Jigten Sumgun being very careful Because it's easy, right, to say to people, oh, don't worry, you can purify that. But to successfully purify is not necessarily that simple. So it's better, so I'm partial here. Of course, I'm partial to Jigten Sumgön. It's better to adopt that understanding that, no, before we talk about, maybe I can purify this, first talk about, do I have capacity to bear the personal loss that is going to come? But of course, also saying, ultimately, that's what I need to do. I need to develop to a point that I can bear this. And then from within that context, ask, can I or can I not? Yeah. So here, Jigten Sumgön maintains it makes the result bearable for him. Jigten Sumgön speaks of permission when the bodhisattva is able to bear the consequences of the non-virtuous deed that he performs while bringing sentient beings to maturation and liberation. An example of such an action is the killing of the assassin by the merciful captain discussed in the commentaries in the context of Vajra Statement 3.13. So we already looked at this example in 3.13. To prevent the assassin from experiencing the fruition of bad karma through the killing of 500 merchants, the captain kills the assassin. Thereby, not only is the assassin without the karma of killing, but the 500 merchants are also spared the consequences they would have incurred had they had to protect themselves by killing him first. So many levels, of that action is actually very praiseworthy. But the merciful captain himself has to bear the suffering of hell for committing a non-virtuous deed. And even when much later he is born as the Buddha himself, as Buddha Shakyamuni himself, a later consequence of that karma is that he pierces his foot with an acacia thorn. There's one incident, like a thorn pierces his foot and he was bleeding and in pain. It is said that that is the final ripening of that act of stabbing that assassin. But then, when the acacia thorn pierced Buddha Sakyamuni's foot, right? Unlike me, he did not go, running around like a headless chicken. He understood clearly. He did not go, like, oh, it's Ananda's fault, that led us into this path with all these thorns. He should have checked into this path before he led us there. Or who left this thorn here, So like last night in the teaching, I said, if our hearts are not so tied up with our emotions, we loosen that up with an understanding of emptiness. Then when things that don't go our way turn up, we have more capacity to see how cause and effect is working. Then we happily accept cause and effect unfolding. But when we don't have understanding of emptiness, and what does that mean? That means we get all tied up. Tied up in resentment, tied up in blame, tied up with even angry at ourselves. Even that is a form of tying up. Then when we are tied up, that means we're stuck, that means no wisdom of emptiness is shining, then we have no capacity to see how cause and effect is now playing out. And so when we don't see cause and effect playing out, we also don't see emptiness. When we don't see emptiness, we also have no ability to see cause and effect playing out. And then we remain stuck. Two points are essential for Jigten Sumgön. First, even if done with a generally compassionate motivation, killing is a non-virtuous act, as Chogi Drakpa states in the following Vajra statement. His commentary to Vajra Statement 4.7. If the great merciful captain, even though the motivation at the time of the cause is to benefit beings, does not cultivate the motivation of hatred at the time of the actual deed, he cannot stab the victim with his weapon. Second, such an act will inevitably have painful consequences for the bodhisattva. Inevitably, I'm a little uncomfortable with that word. I don't know if it is so inevitable. So just maybe soften that word there. Inevitable sounds like, fixed, fated, nothing can be done. No, things can be done. But we will see later on, in another statement in this chapter where he talks about how by training your mind, which is I already said, by training your mind, just like whether it's a little glass or a reservoir for the teaspoon of salt, it makes a difference. So in that way, it's not inevitable. But in the sense of still the same amount of salt is involved, that is inevitable. Yeah. Once you have put a tablespoon of salt into this water, you cannot unput the salt. As in, once you created the negative karma, you cannot uncreate the negative karma. But the context where that negative karma ripen can be changed. Okay? It can be changed. That's my current kind of understanding. There may be more profound points we have to look more carefully. Yeah. However, at least in the Dorshema, we find one scenario according to which the deed is not only permitted, but also is without painful consequence. That is the case of the king. So the king on the surface was stealing, and unreasonably taxing his people. But there was no painful consequence there. So we don't have to go through that. So here, the rest is sort of like Sobich pointing out the nuances. When you look at the nuances, it's not so clear-cut necessarily. I like the one about a skillful trick. So there, Sobich, he says, so why didn't the captain perform a skillful trick? Skillful trick is Sobich's vocabulary. It's not in our sources. He says, why didn't the captain perform a skillful trick? So he contrasted in the case of the monk who carried the woman across the river. He performed a skillful trick. Because in his mind, he said, I'm carrying a bag of sand. So he did not get aroused, okay? He wasn't like, contact with this woman. So he kept thinking, a bag of sand, a bag of sand, a bag of sand. And he took the woman across. So then there was no negative there, right? And he also helped the woman, all of that. So skillful trick. So Sobich hypothetically said, why didn't the captain, perform a skillful trick? Maybe he can think, when I push the knife in, I'm actually feeding this guy. So Sobich said, no. It is necessary to recognize that this is a knife, and that is the intended victim of the knife for the stabbing to happen. But in the case of carrying the woman, it is not necessary to recognize that she's a woman in order to do the deed. You see how Sobich is arguing this point? Yeah. So it says, so that's why, this skillful trick is not available for the captain. Any questions, comments?
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
What do you mean in the case of carrying the woman?
Mm-hmm.
There is no sexual desire
Yes.
involved.
Yes.
So, but in the other case, you need to focus on the act.
Yes. Yes. As in, you can accomplish the act of helping the woman without needing for sure to think I'm carrying a woman to help her across. So the skillful trick of thinking of her as, a bag of sand can get the job done. Whereas in the captain's case, right, it cannot get the job done if he thinks, if he doesn't recognize that this is a being and this is a knife that I'm stabbing a being.
Okay, because you need to kill.
Yes, to solve the problem. Here, in the case of the caring of the woman, getting aroused is not needed to get the job done, so to say. Put it more bluntly, The monk getting sexually aroused is not needed to get the job done, which is to get the woman safely across to the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question about you're saying that essentially an unskillful or non-virtuous act will result in whatever result that comes.
Yes.
And the difference is whether it's in perception of how you see that hell situation. If you're a bodhisattva, it's okay. If you're not, it feels like hell.
Yes.
So in the case of a non-virtuous bodhisattva, not a bodhisattva, and I'm going back to the water business, the salt in the water. If we as people in a so-called hell realm, if initially the salt is in a cup of water, our practice or skillful means or virtuous actions can put that cup of water into a gallon.
Yes.
And then you can keep putting it into bigger containers so it begins to feel better.
Right. And also depends on how quickly you have to drink.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes no chance,
Yeah.
Then be aware that some karma ripen very fast.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, for me, it's Kyoba Rinpoche cautioning us not to so quickly ignore the workings of karma. It's a very cautious and wise kind of emphasis.
So it still gets back to this thing you've emphasized on many occasions, is that everything really matters. Being mindful as often as we can.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
The only way to see this bigger picture.
Right. In some ways, it's balancing up, right? All those teachings that talk about how powerful the practices can be, right? That can remove suffering. So in other contexts, it's almost like a Dharma salesman, talking about how powerful the practice is. And if we get like carried away by how powerful the practice is, we run the risk of being careless on the cause end of things. If we think on the result end, we can take care of business. We run the risk of being careless about the cause end. So in some ways, Kyoba Rinpoche is taking us back to like, why don't you focus on the cause end of things? Pay attention there. Put your attention there. Don't rely too much on how on the result end, maybe I can change things. Maybe, maybe not.
The cause end is easier.
Yes. More reliable in a way.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to the cause side. But often we don't think there's a problem until the result comes, right?
Yeah.
Like this pandemic, you know? Like it didn't just happen. The way we have been, you know, messing with so many things, you know, the way that the biodiversity has been compromised. So that kind of balance is gone. And so these very virulent strains of things are going to quickly because they, right, for us, it takes several generations to develop immunity to something. But for, you know, others, you know, because their lifespan is shorter, they can quickly. So all these are caused, you know. But here we are on the end side of things, you know, now trying to find a solution. But the cause end is more important, you know. I think this is one of the take-home lessons of what Kyoba Rinpoche is talking about. So on the cause end, you have to ask yourself, okay, now I don't have a choice, I think, between a stone and a rock and a hard place, you know. So what do I do? Well, think out the worst case scenario. And can you put up with that? If you can put up with that, and if your motivation is good, proceed. Don't instead, you know, think in terms of like, maybe I'll be forgiven. Maybe they will understand. Like I have good motivation. Let's just hope for the best. These are, you know, our way. Instead, Kyoba Rinpoche wants us to say, the worst case scenario of this, you know, slightly not so good thing that I'm going to do. Can I bear it or not? Think about it from the cause end of things. Now, I think it will be a fault too if we are over careful, right? Then you just look out for yourself. There are also teachings, you know, by Kyoba Rinpoche that says, you know, if you just keep thinking in terms of, well, personally, will I suffer or not? If you keep thinking like that, then all these recitations for bodhicitta is useless. And without bodhicitta, we can never be free. Also useless, right? Other questions? Oh, wait, there are things blinking. I have to remind everyone, you know, things that happen on chat, I don't see them on my computer. So most of the time, it all just flashes. Sometimes it turns up. So what is going on there? Ordinary people like us, should we focus more on karma purifying practices like Vajrasattva, for example? Well, of course, you always do Vajrasattva, but again, the point here is, you know, watch out on the cause end. You know, don't be so Yeah? Don't think, yeah. So exactly, I don't know. I'm not saying you're thinking like that, but don't be overconfident with, oh yeah, I will deal with it later tonight with Vajrasattva. But on the
No,
cause end,
because the questions was related to what we do not remember what we did in past lives.
oh
So,
yeah, past life, of course,
yeah.
But now,
Not just for past lives. Now we have to be conscious. We have to be aware
yes,
what we're doing.
yes, right, exactly. So then yeah. So Vajrasattva and all sorts of purification practices, they help. They help in purifying. They help in making the container bigger and bigger rather than little cup. Yeah, into a gallon, into a baby swimming pool, into a big swimming pool, into a reservoir, all that. But stop putting salt in. It's the most sure way of not having to drink salty water. There's the story of kind of not a story, kind of a parable. You could call it that. There was a guy who comes to a village, and this village has a big river. And he saw that, that lots of people gathered at the river. There are tents set up. There's like, and when he entered the village, apparently, like where all the houses, the main street, and there's barely anyone. And so he's like, where is everyone? They're like, oh, they're by the river. So he goes to the river, and there's a whole operation going on. And he walks closer, and he said, what's going on? They're like, oh, we are doing this operation for a few weeks now. It's like, what is it about? And it's like, are there these babies, right, that keep floating down the river? So we have a baby rescuing project here, and very organized. Some people are cooking food for the rescuers, and so this guy, he's looking at everything. Then finally he said to them, he said, this is very admirable what you guys are doing and everything. He said, but I was just curious, has anyone gone upstream to see who is throwing babies into the river? And they're like, oh, true. No, we have not gone upriver to see who has been throwing babies in the river. Yeah. So sort of, you know what the parable is about, right? Yeah. Sure, you can purify, and you have to, as long as babies are still turning up, but also at the same time, send someone upstream to stop whoever it is that is throwing babies into the river from throwing babies into the river. So you go both directions. Yeah. So I think Kim actually basically said that. Yeah. So yeah, on one side you accumulate, but you cannot just do one or the other. So on the cause side, we really need to look. Be careful on the cause side. Then on the result side, there are things still we can do. But mainly to me, this big point. Of course, Sakya Pandita and all that, there's many points going on. But I mean, overall for us, we're not like needing to be Kempos and Geshes and debating all those points. The main point here is, I think, like, don't make the mistake of thinking there will be a special discount later. There will be amnesty later. There will be presidential pardons later. Because that may or may not happen. That's more the point even, Although here it says it's inevitable, but it's good to think that it is inevitable. But it's not literally inevitable. If it is literally inevitable, then as the Buddha said, then the spiritual path is useless. That means you cannot change anything. Yeah, then that's eternalism. Yeah, but it's strategic to think, oh, I might not get a discount. Yeah, so don't shop. Now getting closer to holiday season, don't shop, right? Yeah, with the thought that, oh, maybe I'll get a bonus at the end of the year, so I'm going to shop. If you shop that way, and the bonus doesn't come, then you're in trouble. However, there will be times, right, where we say, I don't know, I may or may not get a bonus, but I really need to shop. We all have those moments, but I really need to shop more. But, more seriously, it's like, I really need to shop because, it's been a tough year for my kids. If I don't get them something to kind of make it a little bit better for them, I cannot bear that, So I'm going to do it, but then the bonus may or may not come. So never mind, I will prepare for that. So that is the courage. That is the courage. So I will do other things to prepare for that. Because the bonus may or may not come. That new, project, I may or may not be able to sign it. But given the circumstance, I don't have a choice. So I'm going to buy it. That is what it's saying here. Be clear-headed. Don't expect a miracle to save you at the end. Making decisions that way is not good.
Gracias.
Mm-hmm. So now start shopping, okay? So Friday, we do 4-7. Then Saturday is the teaching with Kenjan Rinpoche. Yeah, that will be good. It'll be Rinpoche's first time using Zoom. So I will lay down some rules for everyone at the beginning of the session. Definitely everyone will be muted and no one can unmute themselves. I don't want people to interrupt Rinpoche. Then as Rinpoche gets more and more used to and comfortable using Zoom, it varies, for some people using Zoom is very exhausting. And also Rinpoche's team, people around him, when it comes to technology, they are very behind. So we want them to get up to speed. And they want to get up to speed too. They really want to support Rinpoche, very good people. But still, as you all know, yourselves too, technology can be so challenging. So we want to do this as kind of a practice first for Rinpoche to get comfortable with that. Then once that happens, then in fact, I will arrange for Rinpoche to teach. That will be translated into Spanish. And then translated into Vietnamese, translated into Chinese. And then Rinpoche has expressed, as I said, interest in meeting on a weekly basis in the context of one of our classes. So we'll see how that unfolds. Yeah. Changchu Semcho Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyurchi Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Pa Ya Gong Ne Gong Du Pe War Shou.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.